I think we've lost someone. Mohammed, now is not the time to quench your thirst.
He needs water after what's just happened.
Take two after Kabzi forgot to press record.
Or is it Mohsin?
True.
That's fine, just fix yourself up. Just sort your beard out. Is your beard all polished? How about your Mohsin? Is your beard all polished?
Get rid of it. Suck my stomach in.
That's my beard all polished.
What beard, man?
There are some hairs there. I'm waiting for the day I can actually grow a nice beard.
Let's crack
Kabzi, are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go. Let's crack on.
All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the IFG fortnightly news roundup. I'm your host, Khidr Mohammed, the community lead at IFG, and with me are two special people today. We've got our investment associate, Mohammed At-Taleib, and I got it right this time, didn't I?
You did.
I absolutely did, I rehearsed that. And we've got someone who's not Ibrahim Khan. This is the other co-founder. You might be familiar with him, Mohsin Patel. How are you doing, Mohsin?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa
Pretty
alaikum
good.
salam.
I'm good. I'm looking forward to it. I'm like a nervous Marcus Rashford standing on the touchline, about to make his debut in front of 70,000 at Old Trafford.
Oh, see, I don't get that reference because I
You
don't
get
watch
it?
sports.
You're not a football man.
No.
I didn't watch football, but I got the reference.
You got it.
See, if it was anime or like movies or like Marvel superheroes, I would have got it. But.
I'm like a young Keanu Reeves about to go onto the set.
Ah, okay.
Now I
I got it. Now that makes sense. Right. Okay, Mohsin, what's our story for today?
So pretty interesting one. I don't know if you guys have heard about this one, but basically the Communist Party, or the party as they're known in China, have basically pulled the rug from underneath the feet of a $100 billion industry. And what I mean by that is, what they've basically said is there's a bunch of these private tutoring companies in China. And it's a very, very popular thing. It's like ingrained in the culture that kids get private tutoring. And what they've basically said pretty much overnight is, you guys don't exist anymore.
Wow.
So they've basically decided, and I guess let's rewind and just understand the logic here. It's not completely irrational. So what's gone on is, China is in an irreversible population decline, right? So the women are averaging 1.3 children, and the population is getting very old. There's not enough kids. And what that means is, that they're in a population decline. And the problem for China is that they've not yet got to, the households have not yet got to that level of wealth of, the advanced economies. But, they're in this population decline along with other, aging economies like Italy and Japan, some others. And part of the problem here is that, raising kids is expensive. Yeah. And one of the reasons raising kids is expensive in China is because you're expected to do all this private tutoring. And I was speaking to a few people about this, and one of them actually told me that in China, it's so bad that the teachers deliberately go slowly in their classes. So they'll teach, they basically teach half-heartedly. Wow. And they'll be like, oh yeah, you need to do this private tutoring, young man. Come and see me afterwards. And then they'll basically do that. And look, from an investment perspective, this is huge news, right? This is it caused a massive ripple in the investment community, because there was a lot of money, a lot of private equity money in this industry. It's a $100 billion industry. And you can think about it, right? From an investment perspective, you've got huge population, China. Obviously, everyone knows how big China is. You've got basically this thing which is ingrained in the culture, you get private tutoring. That's just what you do. And you've got these companies that are providing it, for-profit companies that are providing it, and they're able to make a killing. It's a dream combination. So there was money pouring in here. One of the few areas really that foreign investment was coming into China, because it's so attractive. And the party are basically gone.
Wow. They took an axe to the tree.
Exactly.
And now there's giant giant income bringing machine has suddenly gone, and now investors must be scrambling to get their money back.
Yeah, like I was reading before, and there was there was a funny quote from one private equity guy, and he's like, "We're just waiting for death."
Oh my days.
It's quite funny, but yeah, like I mean, there is some talk of like, you know, they're kind of waiting to see exactly how the rules will be implemented. So there is some talk of, you know, these companies, they might be able to pivot into like vocational stuff and, you know, that kind of thing. So like moving away from, you know, national curriculum to like vocational stuff. But, you know, this really is like, it's a bit of a hammer.
But hang on, what's the thought process here? Because you said that they want to encourage people to spend more time with their kids, is it? Or
no, it's to make it more affordable, right? So like,
so how does taking away private tutoring make raising kids more affordable?
If you force like all the schools to actually teach properly and it's all free at the state level, then, you know, you're not having to pay for this private tutoring.
So
right?
Another way to look at this story really is to say that China is basically trying to better its schooling system.
Yeah.
And basically reform its schooling system and making it much better than what it originally was, which personally I think is which is good. I think that's a good thing. Not for investors, but it's good for all those parents are spending ridiculous
reforming
amounts of money.
a school is one thing. Telling them all these private tutoring companies you can't work anymore, I mean, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, perhaps there were different ways of, you know, going about it. I think that, look, from an investment perspective, I think I agree with you broadly from like, you know, like a socio-political level. But then what they've also done, China, is they've also said like you companies now, like you can't take investment, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so, you know, one of the few places that foreign investors were willing to invest in China was here. And obviously now that's gone. And you can imagine what this has done to like, you know, the Chinese stock market and stuff, like literally like billions and billions wiped out for like publicly listed companies. And there were a whole bunch of private companies as well that had raised like really, really big rounds. Who obviously now is completely.
I mean, it's quite interesting how the future will look like in terms of the global economy, because China is a bit unfair in that they invest across the world, take technologies from other countries, but they don't allow anybody to invest in their own country and they operate in their own economy. And now that, you know, we have a lot of automation, people are looking at how can we do manufacturing inside our own countries. I wonder if China will still be that huge behemoth if they continue with laws such as that.
Yeah.
Why is it that China doesn't? Forgive me here for my ignorance. Why doesn't China allow investment into their own?
I mean, it goes back again to the Communist Party. That's very controlling over China, and you know, when they say you can do something, you do something. When they say you can't do something, you can't do something. I mean, the whole reason they got into this problem was because they had enforced that one-child policy, and so people did not have kids, and now they're sitting in there, in what happened because of that.
True. So it's more about external influence not coming into the country. Okay, that's very interesting. Our next exciting story, there's been a lot of chatter going on in the crypto world. Mohammed, why don't you tell us what's so exciting?
Yeah, everyone's third cousin's favorite asset. So Bitcoin shot through the roof, crossed through the $40,000 mark, and then came tumbling down back again. Nothing new, we've heard this before many times. But basically what happened is the London City AM newspaper had this sort of exclusive story that they had some insider that said Amazon was going to start accepting Bitcoin payments. And it all stemmed from a job ad that Amazon put out for a head of product for cryptocurrency or digital currency. And then people started speculating that Amazon's going to accept cryptocurrency payments, and Bitcoin went up. Then Amazon came up with a statement saying, no, we're not accepting Bitcoin payments. And it came tumbling down again.
But it is back around, I was looking at it just before we came on set. It is back around the $40,000.
People say it's going to cross the $100,000 mark. I mean, I suppose, you know, if everybody's, you know, uncles and granddads and everybody else are getting into the Bitcoin hype, then it probably will, right? Supply and demand, and there is limited supply of Bitcoin. Although what I find funny is the amount of leverage that's in the market. So, you know, one of the reasons why it shot up so high is I think there was like $960 million of shorts that were executed because, so, I mean, you know, for people's understanding, you know, normally they would take positions and bets on the market, whether the market go up or down, and if the price goes above or below a certain point, they'll automatically, their bet goes into play, and then, you know, they'll make a decision on the market. Okay. And so because the price went above a certain amount, the shorts, they probably have caps, basically liquidated, and so that shot the price up even more, and then that's why you have these kind of big jumps in the market. And if it's such a volatile asset, don't do that. Like, use money you're willing to lose. Don't start using leverage and start betting on the markets.
That's true. That's true. It's actually quite interesting because we know that even the government themselves have commissioned a report with the Bank of England to try to see how they could leverage or create a kind of digital currency that is what's the word? Kind of controlled by the government in essence.
Yeah, centralized. Basically.
Yeah, centralized digital currency. I think that's what they actually called it. The Chancellor, he recently wrote quite a lengthy status that I've actually got in front of me, basically saying how there's they want the UK to be a financial hub and how they want to, in essence, go into this but not replace cash and checks and stuff as well. So there's quite a lot of
but doesn't that just defeat the whole purpose of cryptocurrency in the first place?
Yeah.
I mean, digital money has been around for ages. The whole philosophy behind cryptocurrency was becoming kind of a libertarian philosophy of an independent currency, independent of governments, independent of control. We all suffer from the KYC checks and people trying to hide away from taxes and government trying to control our money and closing bank accounts at will. Whereas with cryptocurrency, the idea was that the money's in the control of you own your own wealth and your own money and nobody can touch that. So the government wants to introduce their own cryptocurrency. I don't see how that fits the narrative.
That's literally what one of the main issues that I had as well. And what the Chancellor said, there was a big strong reaction from quite a lot of the public some that were very kind of for it. And then the opposite you had were people that were very against the idea of the government having that control over your money, because we know that the government already has some amount of control on banks and such, so your money is being controlled there. But if that happens to cryptocurrency as well, you've basically debauched the system. And what many people are kind of saying is that the government is going to an increasingly kind of a look that, similar to much of what China does with its citizens and their wealth, that has absolute control on how businesses are run and how bank accounts are held, in essence.
I guess what's confusing me a little bit about how, at a government level, how they're thinking about cryptocurrency is that, as you said, Mohammed, digital cash is not a new phenomenon, right? So the benefits that you get of cryptocurrency seem to be being conflated with digital cash. Yeah. And I genuinely don't know this because I don't know. I'm not privy to the conversations, but I don't actually know how at the government level they perceive cryptocurrency and what they think is different to digital cash. Time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes down to that whole trust in the government kind of thing, and people will be on different levels of the spectrum in this case. Some people don't have that. Some people think that if the government can control it, it's safer for people, and they rely on that trust very much. Whereas you have the other opposite end of the spectrum where people are like, well, no, I don't trust the government, and I don't think that if they had control over my money that they would do justice by it, and that I would be under threat. And in essence, it's a tug of war between these two kind of things and what mindset the masses adopt.
What's going to happen for sure, though, is that, look, this cryptocurrency stuff, it's happening. It's real. Something's going to happen. Twitter, I think, said they're going to start doing stuff around that. Amazon, obviously, they put that job ad out. And I was thinking about that, actually, the job ad, right? And
Mohsin's going to leave IFG.
So, I was thinking about this, and I actually think it's a publicity move. Because look, if Amazon was serious about, this, what they've said in the job ad is, look, we're taking this really seriously. This is a really important thing for us. We want someone who's going to come in and basically, grab this by the scruff of its neck and lead Amazon, through our understanding of, cryptocurrency and where we end up with it, right? That's a big position. That's an important position. If you think cryptocurrency is going to be very, very important for the future, you're going to want the lead on that to be, it's a pretty senior role, right? Yeah. Now, from my understanding of Jeff Bezos, that's not a role that you put out publicly. Yeah. You source that role from your networks, right? And it's like any important role. If you're serious about it, you're pretty much sourcing it from your private network. So, for me, it was a publicity move. It's a move that says to the world that Amazon is taking this very, very seriously. And I was thinking, what could be the logic here? And I don't know, maybe this is partly a talent thing. You think about the world, right now. What does Amazon definitely need? Definitely going to need really, really talented developers, right? And in the tech community, obviously crypto is very, very hot. Like, what do devs like to do? They like to work on the cutting edge of technology, and this stuff is the cutting edge. And I don't know, I'm speculating here, but like, is this a move that says to the best devs in the world, forget your Googles or whoever else they're losing talent to, this is the place that you want to be if you really want to be at the cutting edge.
Interesting. I mean, Amazon is the biggest company. Well, not the biggest company, but one of the biggest companies in the world. They're taking over everything from obviously shopping to space travel now. So the fact that they're entering a new market, the cryptocurrency market, is no surprise. But also, I don't think I like it that much because it just means that they now control everything, including our own money. So
yeah. But I think the point here is it's not necessarily about them doing their own cryptocurrency. It's about the fact that this becomes a medium through which to transact. Yeah. And I think that that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I talked about the speculation a bit earlier, and I mean, you do need speculation for something to become mainstream, because that's what's going to bring the liquidity and allow people to transact and buy in and out. So it could also be a good thing.
True. I think a key point that I've taken away is that a lot of the times, whenever people are asked about cryptocurrencies, it's like what's that spread that people either love it or hate it? Marmite, yeah. So it's like Marmite. There's either people that say, oh, it's just something that's gonna like come and go, it's a fad, or they're like, no, this is the future. You've not got an in between where people are like,
it's the latter.
It's always like one or the other. But now for certain that we know, like, look, the British government's looking into it, Amazon's looking into it. If that is the case, then we know this is here to stay. This isn't going anywhere. Yeah. And that has now kind of more or less solidified its position. Yeah. And I think that's quite key.
What about the market manipulation?
That happens all the time though, right?
It does, but I know we're in a new world, but it's quite in bad taste, because I think there's going to be people who see a tweet. I mean, to be honest, if somebody's going off a tweet, then maybe they deserve it. But if it is somebody who looks at that, let me buy, gets into the hype, and for him maybe it's a bit of fun, but he is losing his hard-earned wealth and money, and that's being transferred to somebody else. And the other thing about the whole cryptocurrency thing is that people call it an investment, and it is kind of an investment, but at the same time, what is the value being produced for the world? I mean, what is money and wealth? It's just the transfer of, I owe you something, you owe me something. And if you're not producing something that we can all enjoy, you're not growing more food, not producing more clothes and stuff, it's not actually building value. So the price going up is not indicative of the world getting better.
The creation of, yeah. No, I think that's very fair. One of the observation that I had was that what's interesting is that this is I don't know, it's a bit wider general observation, but it relates to this point. You think about the important players, right, in the world, and in yesteryear, you kind of had I guess more traditional types that were the big influencers, but now, because of the way the world has changed towards tech, right, you've got the rich, the very rich, the elite, and the influential people are basically tech entrepreneurs, aren't they? And I was thinking that, look, these are the people that affect things, at a macro level. Like, generally speaking, things, if they want something to happen, they can kind of make things happen in that direction. And it's interesting that, tech entrepreneurs, generally speaking, they get to that position because they want to do something good. And where we can talk about the ethics of Facebook, Amazon, and whatever. That's a different story. But I think fundamentally, the likes of Zuckerberg and whatever, they got into this stuff because they wanted to affect positive change at some level. And it's interesting now that as a society, these are the people that are kind of at the top, and people listen to these people more than, say, political leaders. So
I was actually commenting on that. I think before, anybody who is ambitious and wants to have maybe power or whatever it is, he would become like a president or a minister. I mean, you hear of, Winston Churchill and Reagan and everybody else. Whereas in today's world, the people who are these kind of trying to push up in the world become tech entrepreneurs, and then the billionaires, and now the power is kind of shifting towards them. I mean, even looking at politics today, like nobody really talks much about the prime minister or politics. It's all about what's happening with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos.
I think personally, and this I could be wrong on this, but I think that has always been the case, that money has kind of like governed how people run the world. And in essence, what I think, even with politicians and such, because now we don't live in a monarchy, and it's not all about the king or the queen ruling. We now have the rich people who can, in essence, lobby governments and get what they need done. But now I think that because of social media, and because now these rich people now have faces attached to them, before they were, people that were more or less kind of like in their high castles and in their ivory towers, you wouldn't really see them much. But now they've got social media, they're out there, the news is covering them because they live interesting lives. What we can also say is that there's less accountability towards them as people. Because they're a billionaire, it's not like they're answering to as many people that a politician would per se. For example, a prime minister has only so much room to move before he's held to account by his ministers and his cabinet and MPs and such. Whereas a billionaire, he's very much his own free agent. Maybe you could say, okay, the companies he's tied to and the investors of those companies can hold him, but they're less likely to kind of have that hands-on role with him compared to like how MPs would.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think that now what was once very hidden is now just a lot more public.
I mean, it is the one flaw, because I mean, the free market has created enormous wealth, but it's also concentrated power in the hands of a few people. True. And as a social structure, that is never a good thing. That's sort of anti-free market and anti-democracy and freedom, isn't it?
Of course, and as we know, history tells us that when the wealth gap between the rich and the poor widens too much, usually this results in kind of riots and protests and stuff that eventually disrupt everything, or sometimes shake or even change the system for better or worse. Moving on now, we've talked quite a bit about cryptocurrencies. So we went from the east, we've come a bit more to the west, and now we're going to head back to the east. Mohsin, what's going on in the east now?
So this is one where I guess, similar to our earlier China discussion, I think people are very, very much underestimating, this one. And that's why I think, I'm calling it, so I'm putting my neck on the line here.
Mohsin's crystal ball gazing now.
My neck's on the line, and I'm calling basically a bit of a Christmas crisis in terms of prices. So again, let's do the analysis here. So what's going on in the world is that you've got, as we know, China is a massive exporter, right? A lot of our goods, probably the stuff we're sitting on, is from China. And that's been fine for many years. And I've only recently been exposed to like how this actually works. So the way it works is that you get, so let's say you've got a chair company, very successful individual that you are, and you've got a contact in China who's making your stuff for you, right? You get the stuff shipped over. But the way that process works is that typically you'll have an agent in China, and you will say to your agent that, look, my factory or like my supplier, they've got my order ready. Can you go and collect it? I need to book a 40-foot container, and you need to load my goods into the container, get it onto the cargo ship, and I will receive the cargo ship at Dover or God knows wherever it is, Hull or whatever ports we have in the UK. And typically, the prices of that space, because you're effectively buying space, right, in a container. Typically, the prices of those have been about $2,000. Okay. $2,000-$3,000, something like that, for a 40-foot container. You get it, you factor it into your costings and your margins, and you sell it on. Everything's hunky-dory. Very nice Eid at your household. But now what's happening is there's been a few factors that have meant the cost of these containers has like absolutely skyrocketed. So the few factors that have kind of come together are number one, there was obviously with the pandemic we had massive rises in e-commerce, So the demand for this stuff was like just going through the roof. And because you had setting up a website is easy, right? You just got to put it up online, and it doesn't matter where your goods are. You don't need to buy a store anymore. You just get some space and like chuck the stuff in. So there was a lot of stuff being ordered from China. So there's like huge spike in volume, basically. That's the first factor. Second factor was around Brexit. And there's a whole kind of thing which probably not got time to get into discussion, but there's a whole thing around like lorry drivers, and I guess like a bit of a shortage of them here in the UK. And the third factor was around, if you remember the Suez Canal stuff, when there's like a lot of blockage and what have you. And all of these factors, and there's probably a few more as well, but all of these factors have meant that getting container space is basically quite hard. And so what you found now is that instead of you paying $2,000-$3,000 for your 40-foot container, you're paying like $12,000, $13,000, $14,000, $15,000 for your container space. And you can imagine, so that's like 7x, 8x, your cost, which if you're making, I don't know, like a 30% margin on your chair, that's becomes unsustainable, right? And that's you can see where I'm going with this, right? So this is going to mean that you're going to have to hike up prices. There's going to be two things. One, you hike up prices, or at worst, you just say, "I'm really sorry, but this business is unsustainable for me now. I'm off." Or if you're a massive company, you can kind of sustain it for a bit and you wait it out, but you're going to have shortages of stock. And there has been some news stories recently you probably noticed around supermarket shortages and what have you. And my view, again, it's a bit out there, but like my view is that this is like a bit of a cover story. They're dressing it up as, there's shortages and it's all like a bit temporary and don't panic buy or whatever. And I'm not saying we should panic buy, by the way. But I actually think this is a bit of a systemic issue because what we're now seeing, like we're filming this in like end of July, right? And what we've got is at the moment everything's fine because companies have got enough stock to kind of like they bought enough stock well in advance, right? But as things come up towards Christmas, ordinarily the Christmas stock would have been ordered like a few months ago probably, but whether people have been able to get stuff onto their containers or not is unclear. The cost they've paid for these containers are very unclear. I mean, definitely has gone higher for sure. And if you think about like the logistics of how importing works, because you're putting stuff into a container, you're necessarily penalized if you're buying big stuff because you can get fewer things on. So yeah, so my prediction is actually that we're going to see some pretty, either shortages or pretty hefty price hikes. So my suggestion is that if you're buying anything bulky, get it done.
Interesting.
Get it done now.
This has already affected me in kind of two ways. So I'm from South Africa and we export a lot of fruits, a lot of grapes in the UK, but we see from South Africa as well. And because there was a shortage of containers, they were all sitting in like cold storage, but they weren't able to be shipped out. And the people are trying to because most of our food is exported locally, we get the bad stuff, then all the good stuff is exported. But this year, because they weren't able to export it, we got really, really good grapes. I was like, wow, I never knew we had this good grapes. So in some ways, I guess local produce, that is kind of the silver lining. We may see better produce locally. The second way was that I'm a bubble tea fan. And there is a global shortage of boba. I know you've been to a bubble tea place recently, but they don't have boba in their shops and their signs saying, sorry guys.
What?
I know.
So you're seeing it in action.
This is a crisis.
Seeing it in action.
Seeing it in action already. It is a crisis.
See, this is the thing. Like people haven't honestly, people haven't picked up on it, but like it's happening, it's coming, like it's there if you're looking for it. And I think it's only going to get worse.
What should people do about it now? Should people start like buying lots of stuff, stocking up, and
buy? I'd say a lot of toilet roll.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Just buy a
it's
lota,
manufactured
guys.
locally, guys. We don't import it from China.
Just buy a lota, guys. Just get a bucket. Use water. It's cleaner. It's more sustainable, and it's cheaper.
No, I'm only joking. I think supermarkets they'll find a way. Like I'm not worried about supermarkets. I think. If you're planning, I think like big purchases, I've been talking about chairs and sofas throughout this whole. It's actually a good example. but it's hard to think of it like straight off the bat. But like I'd say like furniture is probably quite a big one.
Actually, I mean, adding to the third example is
It's all coming out now.
May.com, which went public recently, which I wanted to do. They did, yes. I wanted to buy a sofa from them months ago, and their lead times are 3 months on many of their sofas.
I can imagine, yeah.
So I was like, I don't want to wait 3 months to sit on the couch. So I mean, again, affecting you there.
100%, yeah, it's 100%. So I think that's probably how I think about it. Like the more bulky items, definitely have a think about like getting ahead of the curve on that. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's not much you can do really, but it's coming. So you know, if like look out for it basically, because you'll very quickly kind of understand it, and you'll understand how it affects you as well.
And I think for me, like personally, I know this because I have some of my uncles and some of their friends. They actually quit their day jobs because during the COVID period they worked in the telecoms industry, and for some reason they weren't getting any contracts in. So they quit their jobs and they started shipping in stuff from China, and they started selling, started their own e-commerce business, and that did quite well. So in terms of people like that, what would you kind of advise them?
So I think that, don't forget, a lot of people are not actually importing on containers. A lot of people, they will be, a lot of it air is still, you know, as normal. Like this is like a very specific by sea issue. So it depends on like what you're selling, right? Yeah. And if you're like a relatively new seller, chances are like you're not importing stuff by the container. Like you need to be like doing pretty serious business to be, you know, importing by containers. So it might be though that the person that, you know, they're buying from is importing by the container load, or you know, maybe they'll be absolutely fine because they're buying something that's like quite small and it can be quite cheaply sent by air anyway.
True, fair. Okay, great. So I think to conclude this episode, let's get a quick update on any important or big changes in the market. What do you think, Mohammed?
Well, first thing is Facebook and the future of social media. So Facebook, you know, nobody likes Facebook these days. There's documentaries, there's books about how Facebook messed up the pandemic and spreading lies or whatever else it is. And you know, Mark Zuckerberg is a secret lizard robot or something like that. But despite all our stories, we are still using Facebook and on an increasing basis. I think 12% increase during the pandemic of usage across Facebook's platforms, which include WhatsApp. So even though you're not on the Facebook app, you're still using Facebook services. Yep. But Facebook's revenue is up by 50%.
Whoa.
And their profits, just this quarter, and their profits are up by 101%. $10 billion in profits this quarter. That's profits, not revenue. You know, we talk about all the unicorns reaching $1 billion valuation. This is $1 billion in profits in a quarter.
That rare commodity profit.
Yeah, honestly, it's crazy. And I think we keep talking about the future of social media and how we're interacting in the creator economy, and Facebook is the old dogs, but they're sticking in there. I mean, the stock price obviously is reflecting this. Stock price is up, I think, about 40% from the start of the year. So you know, tech stocks are doing it.
Meanwhile, I mean, I've not actually looked at this in detail, but I read briefly last night that I think Amazon was down after market because I think they missed their revenue targets, which is interesting.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
I mean, Facebook beat their revenue targets by like 20% or something.
Yeah.
It's a slight dip now because they said that, you know, the coming quarter there will be a downturn given the pandemic is over, and you know, various other factors including Apple's privacy policies these days. But you know, so far they've done incredibly well.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Other news as well. DeepMind, London-based, owned by Google. They are basically an AI research organization, and they produce amazingly crazy stuff, including, you know, they became famous a few years ago because they beat the best Go player, which was, you know, thought to be not possible. It was very difficult to do, and their AI actually did it.
Go player, what's that?
So Go is like, I think it's a Chinese game, but
it's a lot of China this episode.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's been around for a few centuries. Similar to chess. I mean, not similar to chess, but you know, think of a game like chess, but it's a lot more difficult. And the first computer to beat an actual human. Wow. But anyway, so they have recently released. So their model predicted new kinds of the structures of proteins. So proteins is the foundation of life, essentially. And I'm not a biologist here, so don't quote me on any of this. But essentially, proteins are made of amino acids that are, predicted or they're built by DNA. Is the one encodes how amino acids will line up to produce a protein. But then what happens is that the protein like twists and folds in kind of random or unpredictable ways, and that creates a structure. And there are millions of different structures. And before now, there was no way of predicting it. Even supercomputers would take too long to predict the structure. And the reason why we need to know structures is because one use case is drugs. So the way drugs sometimes work is that they'll have a molecule that will bind to the protein. So you need to know the structure of the protein to bind. If you read a bit about COVID, the COVID vaccine, a lot of it works like that as well. And this is one of the biggest developments in science for the past 20 years, maybe perhaps since the first genome was actually predicted, the first genome structure was built out. So it's a huge development in science technology, and all done by machine learning and AI, and by a tech company that sells ads. So crazy movements. The good thing is they have made it freely available and online. So if you are a scientist, you can take advantage of it, which is a good step. But it just shows, where the world is moving. One of my friends studies chemistry, and he said, in the next few years, I'm not going to have a job because chemistry and doing lab experiments is being automated. Soon, the human body will be all in a computer, and it'll be like all in silico, all experiments will be done just through computers. It's really crazy the way science is moving, a lot faster than we're thinking. And there's now a lot of venture capital, especially in sort of aging and extending our lifetimes. They say a child born today, 100 years very easily. And in a few years' time, perhaps even 200 years, we would live. Not just extending life, but also the quality of life. So, obviously, you can live to 100 is fine, but if you're like old and frail, probably not. You probably don't want to do that. But if you can increase the quality of life and be 90 and healthy, I think that is amazing. Obviously, nobody can predict the end of your life, but if we are able to live healthier lives and extend that to live a good and healthy life, I think that's quite an exciting thing.
True. I think I remember in my time when I was working in a PR agency and I was working with biotech companies. Yeah. Like some of the stuff that they were coming up with was out of this world, and I remember speaking to one of their lead kind of scientists, and he would very poignantly say that the biotech industry is going through a huge overhaul and massive amounts of changes and developments are going through, to the point where we already see that what do they call those biomechanics or something, where you have replacements for lost limbs. I think that it's called biomechanics, but there's huge developments in this field, and essentially humans are becoming cyborgs as well. And they're saying where will you stop? What if I don't, if I'm I don't need this chunk of my mind, let's replace it with a supercomputer this size, and I literally get that put in, and now I
I mean, you say that. I mean, it's not connected to you, but your phone is an extension of you. That is kind of
true.
You're already a cyborg in many ways.
I remember when someone actually put an oyster chip in their hand, just as a thing, to point contactless payments through your hand and stuff. People do.
Yeah, there we go.
Anyway, very exciting episode today. Jazakallah khairan to Mohsin and Mohammed for joining us today, and Jazakallah khairan to you viewers for listening into our sometimes exciting, sometimes not so exciting views of the market. So, inshallah, catch you again in 2 weeks' time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. I think it's fine.
It's fine.
So what's the next subject for in 2 weeks' time?
We don't know. That's the point.
That's the point, isn't it?
We don't know what the news is going to... If I knew what the news is going to be in 2 weeks, Kabzi, I'd be a billionaire, wouldn't I?
We'd all have invested in Bitcoin.
Or shorted it.
Yeah, true.
Shorting is haram, though.
Oh, astaghfirullah.